flying it remotely and landing it at an Air Force base or some safe place where it can be surrounded by military personnel. So the technology actually exists. There's no question about that. I mean, there used to be a system in England called BILS, BALS, British Autoland System, and I have seen an old Trident jetliner, which looks like a Boeing 727, actually be flown remotely, automatically. Come make a perfect landing, flaps down, even apply the brakes and turn his engines off. And that was 35 years ago. So there's no doubt that the technology exists. And from what von Bülow, the German defense minister, has said, it was definitely on board every one of the 7 of the Boeings that were ordered by Lufthansa, and they were taken out.
Amazing. May I ask one more question?
Hurry.
Is there total validity to the information saying that the man having breakfast from the ISI of Pakistan was having breakfast with Porter Goss and Bob Graham, wired money to Muhammad Atta the weeks prior to 9/11? Is that confirmed?
Absolutely. Without, $100,000 was wired by the head of ISI, and the head of ISI also was visiting the White House and the Pentagon on the day of 9/11.
Amazing. Thank you very much, sir.
Very interesting stuff indeed. Okay, let me see. We've got Brad, Richard, Carol. Let me see. The music's going to start. Well, let me see. We got 10 seconds before the music starts. Let's go ahead. And Brad will hold you right through the break. Good morning, Brad. You're on the air. Go ahead quick.
Yes. One, they started in the early 70s with all the hijackings on being able to piggyback through the transponder. But I want to ask a question about flying the autopilot, and that being with the new glass cockpits. Can you just plug in your waypoint and your altitude, and it will cross that? You'll fly it right into the Trade Center.
Oh, okay. Let's hold on to that thought. We'll get Nila's response when we get back from this break. This is Dave and Joyce. It's a Monday morning edition, and yeah, this is interesting stuff, and it's getting interestinger.
You are listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
I've been in love with a sticky biscuit mask. It gets me where I want to go, and I pump it out as gas. But it's causing people misery halfway round the globe, because my country keeps the pipelines flowing. For the love of oil, we've lost our World Trade Towers. For the love of oil, 500,000 Iraqi kids have died. For the love of oil, Earth's temperature is rising. Our coastlines will drown if the growing tide.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Monday morning edition of the Power Hour. And you listen to the music of Kate O'Connor. She's out there in western Massachusetts and sent me a copy of that song. For the Love of Oil is the name of the song. And you can go to her website and get that by going to kateoconnor.com. And I thank all the musicians out there that send us copies of their music, and I appreciate each and every one of them. We can't, unfortunately, play them all on the radio. And by the way, just a word to the wise, something I had to learn the hard way. If you're a musician, when you're going to send a recording and you want to get it played, you've got to be sure that the lyrics can be heard and understood. I've got some really good music, but you can't hear the words. You really can't. And I used to mix my stuff that way, too, until Joyce smacked me upside the head and says, Dave, you get such great lyrics, but you can't hear them. So I went through and remixed everything, and, yeah, it makes a big difference. Anyway, that said, for those of you that are just joining us, I want to depart for just a second because we've got a bunch of new stations that have come on board, and I know they're having the culture shock, knee-jerk reactions if they're just coming across this program. Many of them are going to be freaking out because they may not have ever heard of information like this, and so the initial reaction is to label this, categorize it, compartmentalize it, and say, oh, you must be a left-wing extremist. Oh, he's a right-wing extremist. He's a extremist. Something. Folks, I want to remind you, the whole purpose of this program, it's got nothing to do with partisan politics. It's got nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats, or as we say, Republicrats and Demopublicans. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got nothing to do with conservative versus liberal. It has nothing to do with right versus left. It has everything to do with right versus wrong. And we will challenge you, each and every one of you listeners out there, to think outside of the cage with this broadcast. And I think that after not very long, you'll be able to understand exactly why we call this program the Power Hour. Knowledge is power. And the fact is, man has an inherent fear of the unknown. As long as you're kept in the dark, you will be fearful. But the simple fact of the matter is, you take that unknown and turn it into a known, that means the fear will simply dissipate. So knowledge is power. That's why we call this the Power Hour. And I want to welcome WKFL AM 1170 in Wildwood, Florida. Welcome aboard. And also WWFL 1340 AM in Claremont, Florida. WREY in Mulberry, Florida. That's AM 780. Also, WIPC in Lakeland, Florida, in the Lake Wales area, and that's AM 1280. And also in Avon Park. And when Joyce comes in and gives her official welcome to WAVP AM 1390, folks, there's some folks in Avon Park that would be very interested to know the research that Joyce has done, because it applies directly to you. That's right, the government has been experimenting on you, infecting mosquitoes and dropping them out of balloons, dropping down on you folks so that you can get bit and they can track the illnesses. Not us saying it, this is congressional records. Anyway, our guest today is Nila Sagadevan, and he is a 30-year veteran. Is an airline pilot, has his degree in aeronautics. The man knows what he's talking about. And just as we were going to the break, Brad in Arkansas joined us. So, Brad, welcome back. And go ahead and restate your question. We've got to get everybody to move into high gear so we can get everybody on. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you started to touch on it last hour, and that was the flying the autopilot. I'm single-seated rated in Citations and King Airs, and couldn't you just plug in your waypoint and your altitude you want to cross your waypoint? You're going to fly it right into a trade center if you want it. Is that correct or not?
Brad, let's first look at the caliber of the pilots, and to make my point clear, let's first look at the Pentagon.
Sure.
If you can show me any sort of a pilot, any sort of an autopilot setup that would bring this aircraft back from 35,000 feet over the Ohio-Kentucky border, go through a descent at 3,500 feet per minute, doing a 360-degree turns during its descent, turn the transponder off at the same time, then approach the Pentagon at ground level, approach the west wing, make a 270-degree turn on the deck, come around and hit the east wing. You're talking about a autopilot system that I'm not familiar with.
Well, no, I'm not disputing anything. I mean, I agree with y'all on the Pentagon. I'm just saying my main question, since ever this happened, is flying the autopilot and using an autopilot to hit the Trade Center. That's my only question.
Okay. Once again, I would ask you to look at the maneuvers. If you can go ahead and make your altitude drops and cause the turns, if you see the second one, when the South Tower was hit, that airplane is going to steep, I'd say a 2 to 2.5 G turn. Now, how an autopilot, even if you had the GPS coordinates of the towers, how you could program it even through the INS for it to make such a rapid turn, drop all that altitude and come in and hit a tower, 1,500-foot high object, I can't see how it can be done. But there's a very easy thing to do next time you're flying in your citation. Punch in the coordinates and see if you can approach a tower anywhere.
Well,
and see how close you get.
It seems, though, that once you plug it in and you turn it on and the computer figures out where it is, it's going to try very hard to get it onto the course that you asked to go.
So these guys who couldn't go ahead and solo the 150 somehow managed to get the flight, the FMC, the LNAV, disengage the autopilots, punch in the coordinates. Even if they did all that, looking at the ranges, the distances and altitudes they came from, the maneuvers that they went through, and how this thing locked directly onto a tower. If you look at the approach paths of both of these, they go over Building 7. Mysteriously, which was also turned into dust in a controlled demolition. Are you familiar with that building?
No, I'm not.
Okay. It would appear that both of these aircraft are homing in on Building 7. The same building, right. Building 7, the same building that was brought down in controlled demolition. And there's evidence that there was some sort of a homing device located in Building 7 that was intentionally brought down with the demolition. And going back to your question, I cannot see how, given the coordinates of the Twin Towers, even with the INS, if you plugged in your local coordinates, that these airplanes could have gone through these automatic maneuvers using a conventional autopilot in an airliner. And I'm not talking about this the various robotic systems that are available now and the remote systems.
Well, we don't know what's available to it. I mean, the military always has, 50 years ahead, technology 50 years ahead of what we have. And the question was raised numerous times. And by the way, Brad, thank you. You bring up.
Well, I just want to say I don't dispute anything y'all have said. It's just that's a question that's always been lingering. This guy couldn't fly a Cessna. Well, you don't have to if you don't have to take it off and land it.
Well, that's true too. Now, the other question here is, and I want to ask Nila. Isn't there something on a plane, sort of like, certain trucks that are on the road have a governor so that they can't drive over 65 miles an hour. No matter how hard they press that accelerator, it's not going to let them go over 65. Isn't there something also on the commercial airliners that will prevent a pilot from making a maneuver that's going to create more than, like, say, 1.6 Gs or something like that? I mean, isn't there something that prevents a pilot from doing that?
Yeah, absolutely right. There are numerous redundant systems that will do that, and including approaching a stall. There's something called a stick pusher that will literally push the stick forward, so you don't intentionally push the aircraft into a stall.
So unless this is the pilot is completely overridden. I mean, this could not happen. These maneuvers could not have happened if somebody had hijacked a plane, or even if they hadn't hijacked a plane. Let's say the pilot just went bonkers and had a nervous breakdown and says, I'm going to fly a plane in a big circle and make a big turn and slam it into it. He couldn't do it because the plane
would... The autopilot would not have permitted that last maneuver that was made on the South Tower.
So that would indicate, in my feeble mind, that whatever maneuvers were made by these planes could not have been made by a human being in the cockpit. They would have had to have been made either by remote control or by a computer program. Is that correct?
I agree with that assessment wholly.
Wow.
Also, this gentleman, I think, Brad, who was the one who just spoke with us, he happened to mention the pilot saying you don't have to know how to fly to work a pilot. These guys didn't know how an engine worked. They didn't know what pistons were. You can't tell me, first, how do you overcome these two pilots at box cutters? How are you going to drag them out of there?
Well, see, that's what we were told, Neil. See, the thing is, what I'm saying here is that we have to throw everything out. Everything about the story of the training schools, the terrorists, the box cutter thing, everything. Everything's got to be thrown out. That means that if we are basing our schema of what happened on September 11th, if we're saying that box cutters in the hands of terrorists who went to flight schools, that means the whole story was made up.
And who were not on the flight manifests.
The whole thing was made up. This is a huge, unlimited budget black operation if what we are saying is true. And if what we are saying is true, and if this is a huge black budget operation, ladies and gentlemen, I think you all realize that we have a problem that is infinitely more dangerous than the most whacked-out funded terrorists you could possibly imagine right now. That means that the foxes are in charge of the hen house, and they did it themselves. Now, don't tell me that this isn't a war about oil and a war about money and a war about power. And again, I referenced the story that was in the Houston Chronicle several weeks back about Halliburton being awarded $27.5 million to haul 87,000 gallons of cooking fuel from Kuwait into Baghdad. Don't tell me it's not about money. Let's go to Syracuse, New York, and say hi to Richard. Obviously, Richard's listening on the Sunshine Network up there. Welcome. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm just fine. You're on the air with our guest, Nila Sagadevan. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Nila, would you be willing to call into a local talk show?
Sure.
Okay, could I give you the number, and any other of the listeners that could call in? He's a real nice fella. His name is Bill Colley. And unfortunately, he's a neocon, but he's good on the morality issue.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you, Richard, give your phone number.
I will do that.
To John. What we'll do is we'll take you off the air, give your phone number to John, and what I'll do is I'll get your phone number to Nila and let him call you, and then you guys can work out the details.
That would be absolutely
All
funny.
right.
The Tiger would say, great.
There you go. I do want to tell you that usually the way it's done is that the host of the program is the one that usually has to contact the person they want as a guest. Otherwise, it's sort of like the girl asking the guy to invite her to the dance. It doesn't work too well the other way around. But I would suggest, Richard, that you would contact this talk show host and have him invite Nila to come on the program. But anyway, give your phone number to John, and when I get to the break, John, if you will pass that number to Nila, that would be great. Let's go to our next call. Carol in Arkansas. Good morning, dear. You're on the air.
Good morning, Dave, and good morning, Captain.
Good morning, Carol.
I commend you for coming out. Many other pilots should have and I think they will as they're encouraged to, because there's power in numbers. I heard you say the other day when you first spoke on Power Hour, because one of the things, of course, is denial, as you all have mentioned. It's denial that our government would have done this, but then the further issue is, well, what happened to those people that were in the airplanes? I had already come to the same conclusion you did. Would you like to say that again? Because I would like to remind the people that this has been done to the American people. Denial